And we welcome you in for another RedRecover.com Inside the Paint show. It's early for me. I know Kurt had an even later game last night, so he's been relegated to the kitchen there back home in Los Angeles, I assume, or the Los Angeles area. Interesting night last night. I know the chat board is already blowing up here, shockingly, after an awful Miami Heat loss. We will get to every one of your questions here. We'll make this as interactive as possible. The Big O will be joining us, or will be taking over. Maybe I escape him today at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Again, welcome in. This is our weekly 9 a.m. Wednesday, RedRecover.com Inside the Paint show. I'm Ira Winderman from the South Florida Sun Sentinel here in Fort Lauderdale. He's Kurt Helin from NBCSports.com, Pro Basketball Talk in the Los Angeles area. Kurt, it just shows you the difference that one play-in game can make in the outlook.
Yeah.
For the Miami Heat here in the Eastern Conference 7-8 playoff game, the sky is falling. These will be the worst 2 days ever, possibly, in the history of South Florida basketball. And yet, Kurt, I would say based on the outcome, even though it was hair-raising, and, well, I guess we can't talk hair-raising, but it was harrowing based on how it finished with that Anthony Davis 3-shot foul with 1/10 of a second left in regulation. I would bet that there's a feeling, because one, fans can be obnoxious when they win, because they've always felt once they get in the playoffs, they have a chance. But out there in LA, there's a feeling of Lakers championship at the moment, almost. Isn't there, Kurt Helin?
Well, yeah, it doesn't really take much to get Laker fans there. They're a little over the top sometimes anyway. But, yeah, look, I think the reaction among Laker fans was more survived and advanced. It was almost an NCAA tournament type of like, hey, we got through this. Now we get a banged-up Memphis team. Here we go. Now it gets real. And they're just going to gloss over the fact that the Lakers were genuinely awful for large stretches of that game. It's just in the fourth quarter, a worn-down Minnesota team was worse and in foul trouble without Cat. And it just and there were some stretches of in both of these games, because I was the person sitting in the cubicle in the media room watching the Heat game. This was not the highest level of basketball played this season.
No, and there was commonality in the games, Kurt Helin, because Jimmy Butler was not very good. LeBron James was not very good. The two players who you thought could sell, LeBron, I know, did hit a late three in that game, but the really self-will it. So, matter of fact, I'm gonna go to that point, since you were out there in the crypto.com center in LA, are surrounded by a bunch of media. What was it like in the press room there at the former Staples Center as the Heat were getting thrashed against the Hawks? I know there were a lot of national media there for the Lakers game, obviously the bigger game on the night. As you sat there, and to explain to people, the press room in LA is sort of like a sports bar. There's a food room that has a great sports wall that's probably as good as any sports bar. Yeah. And then even in the media room, there are TVs everywhere. So you can sit in almost any position there and catch whatever's going on, whether it's basketball, hockey, baseball, or football. Last night, obviously, there was only one other NBA game. Kurt Helin, what was the national reaction as the Heat fell behind by 24, probably before most of you got to the crypt, but then climbed within 5 and couldn't finish it off? What was the thought there? Because even as late as yesterday, ESPN pulled 17 of their writers, and it was 17-0 that the Heat would win that game. So you tell me, from a national perspective, as you all sat there, you nationally from Pro Basketball Talk and just national writers, when they saw the Heat go down, honestly, so meekly, what was the reaction?
It was shock. It was more like, there was a lot of what's wrong with Miami, and not a lot of, hey, what's Atlanta doing right? Where did this Trae Young come from? And more importantly, like, he shared the ball with DeJounte Murray and some of the stuff that they actually, I'm not totally sure we expected from them, but there was a lot more of, I thought the Heat were going to blow them out. Why aren't the Heat blowing them out? Where's Bam Adebayo? Why is he not being more of a presence in this game? Where's playoff Jimmy Butler? There was a lot of what's wrong with the Heat talk, just bouncing around the media room. And for people who don't know, I wasn't the only one who did this. There's scouts who eat in their pregame that are allowed to come in and eat. They kind of sit at their own table, but there's interaction, and we're all like, hey, what's going on out there?
Yeah. Down 24 at the start, never fired. This is my theory, and I'm going to get to the chat board early today because your theories matter also here. So I have that on my other computer. My theory is this about the Heat in 22-23. They are an arrogant bunch, even if they don't have the skill level, the athleticism, and the size to match. So the Heat came in having defeated the Hawks 4-1 in last season's playoffs, having won the season series 3-1, having won both previous games this season at now the Kaseya Center, before FTX Arena, Miami-Dade Arena. They had won. They felt confident. But also, their backs weren't fully to the wall. They also knew if they lost on Tuesday, as they do, they would have another home game on Friday. And to me, that is the height of hubris and arrogance, to be a seventh-place team and think that you can play with house money. And yet that's how they came out, falling behind double digits within the first 3 minutes, falling behind by 24 in the first half, down by 15 at halftime, hardly playing their best game. It was almost as if, you know what, first round Celtics or Bucks, tough series anyway. We got one more. We'll beat the Bulls or the Raptors on Friday, which I believe they might not now based on how they looked, and we'll be fine. And I think that's who the Heat have been all season. Instead of being one of these stomp on your throat teams, like the Celtics have been at times, like the Bucks have been at most of the times, like the 76ers lately have been at times, the 2022-23 Miami Heat have been a team, we'll do what's needed, but we'll get this taken care of in some form somehow. We're going to make a top 6 seed for playoffs for sure. Oh, okay, we'll make the play-in. We can still get there. Oh, okay, we can be a home team in the playoffs in the first and second round. We'll just secure that over Atlanta. And they keep pushing the rock further down the road. And because of that, they create situations like they're in right now. So, Kurt, from a national perspective, you've written your NBA weekly team ratings. You've written plenty on the Heat. You've seen plenty on the Heat. Was last night's game, the loss to the Atlanta Hawks, an act, like I think, to a degree of hubris and arrogance? Was it a team simply not good enough, too short, not athletic enough? Or was it a bad night by the Heat or a really good night by the Atlanta Hawks?
I would like to give the Hawks, I guess, some credit for showing up, but I think what really stood out to me, and it's the stat that kind of jumps off the page, the Hawks got the offensive rebound on 42% of their missed shots. They were just owning them inside, and the height is, okay, you can make the height argument, but at the NBA level, rebounds are want. Like, the greatest rebounder of all time is Dennis Rodman. He was not the biggest guy off the floor, man. He just wanted it more than you wanted it. Rebounds are about positioning, effort, and desire, and the Heat didn't show it. There was none of that. And it manifests on the boards most of all. I think it manifests in a bunch of places. But this was more a flat Heat team that, at least on TV, and you were in the arena, I'd be curious. Like, Eric Spoelstra seemed almost dumbfounded. Like, just he wasn't quite sure where are my guys?
And there's two ways I look at that. First, I want to go back to your first point, Kurt Helin, and it's this. There is nothing more deflating than a defensive-minded team when you get the stop you sought to get on the initial 24-second clock, and then you see Clint Capella wind up with the ball again. Go ahead, have a cough. Get choked up, Kurt. We understand. I was totally choked up with a loss also. Hey, it happens to me. We don't get a cough button on these computers, so I'll take over here for a second. So to me, the biggest problem was this. They made the initial defensive stop, and then the Hawks got the ball again. And there was nothing more deflating for the rest of the guys, or getting Kurt more choked up, than Clint Capella getting the ball and the Hawks getting to do it again. All of a sudden, when you defend well and you defend okay the second time, the other team has a much easier path to offense. We saw that time and time and time again. That's number one. To Kurt Helin's second point there about Eric Spoelstra, I don't want to say dumbfounded. I think it's a little strong for a Hall of Fame coach like Eric Spoelstra, which I still believe he is. But I think what happens is coaches respect coaches. Coaches respect good coaching. And I think what happened was this. Eric Spoelstra turned down to the other side, And all of a sudden, he didn't see Lloyd Pierce. He didn't see Nate McMillan. He saw Quinn Snyder. And I think Eric Spoelstra hit home early. It sort of hit him as a coach knowing a coach. Oh, crap, he's figured this out. And I think Quinn Snyder came with an Atlanta Hawks game plan. Remember, the Hawks played the Heat twice under Quinn Snyder 3 days after he was named coach. It was hardly a Snyder team, a Snyder system. If you go back to when Quinn Snyder was in Utah, the Heat always played tight last-second games against the Utah Jazz, different teams. But I think what happened at one point there, Kurt Helin, last night was when you said Eric Spoelstra wasn't even animated to a degree, he realized he got out-game planned. He got out-coached. It happens. Now, there's other factors. He got out-rostered also. Matter of fact, I want to posit this, and I know we're loading up in the chat board, and I know we got a lot to get to today. I even would go as far, and I wrote this after the game at sunsentinel.com, I believe the Heat went in with the best player in the game in Jimmy Butler. But I believe the Hawks went in with a better roster. That from, not even from 2, but even from 1 to 15. Yes, you could say Jimmy Butler is better than Trae Young. That's fine. But in the rest of the matchups, I thought the Hawks had an advantage. DeJounte Murray. DeAndre Hunter didn't play great, but he was still there. Clint Capella. They come off the bench now with quality depth. Bogdanovich better than anyone, typically off the Heat bench, except for this case when Kyle Lowry went off and had a game. So, Kurt Helin, this is the retrospect that we can play now. We can look back on it. Did the Miami Heat humiliate themselves by losing to that Atlanta Hawks roster? Or is that Atlanta Hawks roster, which people down here were calling dirt and garbage before the game, maybe better than we gave it credit for?
I think,
I'm sorry to interrupt, and maybe even underachieved this season in finishing those games behind the Heat.
Well, I first off, I believe internally I know internally that's what they thought. They thought the roster was better than what it was. I also think Quinn just unlocked some stuff for them. They didn't really shoot threes under Nate McMillan. And you think of a Trae Young team, you're like, oh man, Trae Young, DeJounte Murray.
Right.
They really didn't shoot a lot of threes. That was the one thing he had under his control. He changed. They really did shoot from 3. They've got, Bogdanovich on down the line. They've got guys who can knock it down.
Sadiq Bey, what a pickup. What a pickup for them at the deadline. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that roster is it had more potential than it had been unlocked, and we saw more of that last night. It's not some dramatically better roster than it looked like last night than the Heat. This comes back to Clint Capella was better than Bam, and that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah, a lot. That your second best player wasn't at the level, your best player wasn't at the level, and all of a sudden your 37-year-old backup point guard was your best player. Maybe that sets the tone also. Okay, I want to get to the chat board. We got a lot to get to. I know a lot of these comments are just visceral, Kurt, so you can hear some of them and go,
oh, yeah, I bet. I would be.
Feel free. Anyway, we start with Too Extreme. What a pathetic game the Heat played yesterday, almost as if they weren't trying. I think that's a bit extreme. I think it's a case where the Miami Heat got to a point where they realized that this would be harder than they think. The Heat motto of, hardest working, toughest minded, all this blah, 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 blah. I don't think that's this season's Heat. I just don't. I think that's Jimmy Butler. I think this is the Heat team for whatever reason. Roster fatigue, maybe coaching fatigue. I think is just worn down and is almost like one of those Southwest want to get away commercials. I mean, the way that game was played last night, it felt like one of those Southwest want to get away commercials when it was 24-point deficit in the first half. So, Kurt Helin, I'll throw it to you there from Greater Goods point. Did you think that the Miami Heat at a certain point lost touch or interest with the game? Or is that just too easy of a sort of spectator takeaway?
I don't think they really lost interest, but I think sometimes you get to a point where you realize this is not our night. Like they made pushes, they made runs, but led by Lowry, like you said, amazingly half the time. They'd make little pushes and they'd get a little bit closer, and then the Hawks would knock down some threes or make some plays or get some turnovers or worse yet, and most consistently. And I think the most demoralizing is what we were talking about. You get the stop. Clint Capella gets the offensive rebound, kicks out another, DeJounte Murray's driving down the lane, and suddenly it's a dunk, and you're like, great. Now we're back to we didn't get the stuff. Those are the moments where I think you can see shoulders shrug on a team, and I felt there were a bunch of those for the Heat last night.
Greater Good chimes in here. The Heat torture me. I find this interesting only because the two teams Kurt covers out in the LA area with the Lakers and the Clippers. There were certain teams in the NBA that you kept feeling it would happen and it would click. We saw some of that for the Lakers over the second half of the season, but they've had their regression moments. We thought we were seeing it from the Clippers. Then Paul George goes out, is going to be out. It looks like at least the start of the first round of the playoffs or beyond that. We thought, hey, we kept hearing it all year and kept talking about it on the Big O show right here in our redrecover.com Inside the Paint, me with my accurate Pembroke Pines reports with Big O about how the Heat, one win away from last season's NBA Finals, one shot away. They were almost there. The entire roster's back except for PJ Tucker. And yet, like Greater Good said, you felt like you were being tortured all season. Kurt, I want an honest impression here, and you do this because you do your team rankings and your perspectives on the league. So I want you to be candid with me here, maybe more so than someone like myself who's involved right away. At what point this season, if at all, Kurt Helin, did you say to yourself, you know what? Miami Heat aren't who they thought they were going to be?
I think I started to get there, honestly, few weeks after the All-Star break, where I started, and and they're not the only team. I'll tell you, the team that I think hit this most nail on the head this year was the Warriors.
Okay.
Just kept, and people still, I mean, they've got a ring, so they get, from last year, so they get a certain level of deference, but you're watching them and you're thinking, wow, they're just not firing defensively the same way. They're not doing that. The Heat started to get there where I'm like, I don't know if they're going to flip this switch. I keep waiting. I'm like you and like a lot of the fans. I'm like, here it comes. They're going to turn this thing around. They're going to turn this thing around. And it got to a point. They're not, early March somewhere where I'm like, I don't think they're actually going to turn this thing around. That for whatever reason, mentally or roster wise, it's not there. It's just not there. And they've got to go find it in the off season, both internally and maybe with, like you said, I think I'm not really worried about Pat Riley overturning the roster,
right?
But I there was a point where I'm just like, I don't think they're not flipping the switch. I'm not sure they know where the switch is.
That's a perfect analogy. By the way, to our producer Sean Stanley, I'm going to go a little long on this first segment. I want to get clear of the chat board here because you're all very angry very early. Remember, it's 6 a.m. out in LA. Kurt's just waking up. He's just trying to clear his throat.
But I'm angry. Coffee. I'm angry. So
okay, I can get that. We go to Carlos, who says, everything that is wrong with the Heat was on display yesterday. Poor defense, no three-point shooting. Adebayo is not a number one or a number two. He will never be aggressive. He's better than a number three by a hair. That's really interesting, Kurt, because a lot of times we try to project something on players who they are not. Bam Adebayo over the first half of the season was an all-star. His play has significantly regressed over the second half of the season. He shrinks against size. That's why he added that floater. So when he played Brook Lopez in the playoffs, as he still might in the first round, he at least can add that to his game, have something else. So your perspective, Kurt, getting beyond all NBA, of which he is not a factor, although some thought coming into the season that third center spot on your all NBA ballot, you would have Jokic, you would have Embiid, and then everyone thought, okay, it used to be Rudy Gobert. He's been terrible. Maybe it'll be Bam. Then Sabonis had a fantastic season in leading the Sacramento Kings. Your perspective, Kurt Helin, the national perspective from NBCSports.com and Pro Basketball Talk, and also from a distance more so than myself. Bam Adebayo, superstar, star, or still not there yet? Based on what you saw last night, based on what you've seen over the second half of the season, based on his body of work since the 2017 NBA draft to this point.
He's a star. Look, he's an all-star. I'm going to forget off the top of my head how many times, but I think he's capable of that level of play. I don't know that he's a superstar. I agree that he's not a one. Can he be a two? I think his defensive versatility makes him really valuable when he's playing well on that end. He's more in consideration for, like you said, I thought he'd be in the mix for that third all NBA center spot before the season. I thought it'd be Bam. I didn't think it would be DeMontis. I thought it'd be Bam or Karl Anthony Towns, who spent most of the year injured and was out. And then, frankly, you saw in flashes for the first half last night why, when he's good, he is so good. Yes. But I think he's just on that level. I think, though, he's on a good year, he's 12 to 17 best player in the league. But
Kurt, let me interrupt you then for a second. So then my question to you then is this: since you also deal with the league from a salary cap perspective, is he overpaid on a year max contract, or is that still? Remember, he's only 2 years into that extension. Is he overpaid, or is that still just the going rate for someone who plays like Bam Adebayo?
I think it's just the going rate. I think your second best player, and sometimes your third, is going to get maxed out. If Tyler's your third, he's making probably about what he should make for that. So
fair enough.
I don't think he's overpaid. He's got to live up to it, though.
Right. Want to move on here. Greater good. Kyle Lowry puts on a performance of hopes he can hang on for 2 more years. Crap. Let him leave. Does one game make it a comeback? And what were your thoughts on Kyle Lowry last night?
One game does not make a comeback. I'd still be hesitant. I think what it showed, though, is when he gets enough rest, right? Like when he had some nights off down the stretch, and when he was able to get fresh and get his legs under him for a night, he can be that. And that's why I thought, and maybe it's optimistic, if you get into a playoff series. In the first round in particular here, Ira, guys, you get all this time off. You get 2 days off a lot between games. Maybe that's good for him. Maybe he can have a better series than he certainly had a regular season.
Good point there. Omar chimes in here. This has been the Heat all year, so damn unpredictable. No one is safe. Time to rebuild. Kurt Helin, are you ready to go from one play-in game to a rebuild, or did it open your eyes and saying, hey, this team damn well better do something dramatic in the offseason?
Rebuild is a little dramatic. Retooling, though.
Okay.
I think you've reached a point where you've maxed out Strus. You've maxed out somehow what you can get from Vincent Strus. Some of the role, those guys stepped up and made plays, but you're asking a lot of them this year, and maybe that's just not who they are. Maybe you need to find a way to get more support and depth around Jimmy and Bam.
All right, let me go real quick through these, man. We got a ton of them today, as you might expect. One of them saying it looks like the Heat are going back to the Hassan Whiteside years. I don't know. Another one saying the Heat belong in Capella University. They certainly were schooled last night. You know what? I'm going to leave it at that because we're running long here, and because I want to throw a question to Kurt so I can give him 90 seconds to ruminate on it. The Miami Heat play the winner of tonight's Chicago Bulls at Toronto Raptors game. The Heat's next game will be 7 p.m., which is scheduled by the NBA. So when we come back after this break on RedRecover.com Inside the Paint, Kurt Helin and I will discuss which is the better matchup for the Heat. Is there a winnable game for the Miami Heat on Friday? Or will Kurt Helin and I be back this same time next week discussing lottery balls? All that and more after this break on RedRecover.com Inside the Paint. And welcome back in for our second segment of RedRecover.com Inside the Paint, our weekly Miami Heat and NBA show here on the Big O Show, typically Wednesdays at 9 a.m., which for me, Ira Winderman from the South Florida Sun Sentinel here in Fort Lauderdale is fine. For him, Kurt Helin from Pro Basketball Talk, NBCSports.com, out in the Los Angeles area, is 6 a.m. in the morning. So I assume during the break he probably filled that second cup of Java, as I'm sure he would need. Kurt, you started 6 a.m. here for us on the West Coast. You were at the Lakers game last night. What time did you get home?
12:45.
That's not too bad, actually, from a 7:30 start there. But still a quick turnaround. I've been there, whether it's been a plane, train, or an automobile. We all do that, especially guys who travel. So it's sort of what we do. It is the most supposedly time of year based on Miami Heat's next game in this play-in tournament. So to reset for people, because the Miami Heat lost last night to the Atlanta Hawks, they now go to a winner-take-all game on Friday. The NBA has scheduled that game for 7 p.m. at the Kaseya Center, formerly Miami-Dade Arena, formerly FTX Arena, formerly American Airlines Arena, the one on Biscayne Boulevard. If the Heat win that game on Friday, they advance to the first round of the NBA playoffs. They then would play 5:30 p.m. Sunday, the NBA announced, against the Milwaukee Bucks, who are the number 1 seed. The winner of Friday goes in as the number 8 seed in the Eastern Conference. If the Heat lose on Friday, they're in the NBA draft lottery with a 0.5% chance of landing the highly coveted number 1 pick. So Heat fan, I've seen this on the chat board and other places, this whole notion of it's just time to tank, just go to the lottery. 0.5%. There's a chance that Heat fireball over there or a lightning bolt will hit me probably as much as the Heat getting number 1. The NBA has weighted the lottery, so a quality winning team like the Heat doesn't wind up doing that. Of course, with the play-in, it'll be one of the few times you will have a team with 44 wins getting into the lottery if the Heat lose. Anyway, enough about that. So Heat next game, 7 p.m. Friday. If there's another Heat game this season, 5:30 p.m. in Milwaukee Sunday. Who the Heat play in their next game will be determined tonight. The Toronto Raptors are hosting the Chicago Bulls in their version of a win-or-go-home game. The loser is done. The winner comes to Miami on Friday. The Miami Heat finished the season 0-3 against the Chicago Bulls. The Miami Heat finished the season 1-3 against the Toronto Raptors. I honestly thought of the playoff play-in pool teams in the Eastern Conference, the Heat's best shot of advancing was against the Atlanta Hawks, and they got their preferred matchup, and they crapped the bed. However you want to put it, that's the reality. So Kurt Helin, who actually went to his supercomputer, which oddly is located in his kitchen next to the coffee maker during our break. Kurt, if you were the Heat and were able to draft an opponent, if you're Andy Ellisberg, Pat Riley, Adam Simon, Mickey Harrison, Nick Harrison, Eric Spoelstra watching tonight without saying publicly, in your heart of hearts, which team, that might be the lesser of two evils, would you prefer to see Friday night arriving at the Kaseya Center?
Yeah, like you said, they haven't had great success against either of them, but I think I would rather see Chicago in this sense. Toronto, after the All-Star break, after they picked up Jakob Poeltl and put him in the paint, were a better team. They were 15-10. They are, I was looking this up this morning, 5.6 points per 100% per points per 100. Better on defense when Jakob's on the floor. Like, he just gives them the physicality in the paint. Plus, he sets a good screen for their athletic guys like Pascal Siakam. I just think he unlocks a lot of what they ultimately wanted to do, and they've just been better over the second half of the season. Both teams are a matchup problem for the Heat, and Jakob Poeltl also brings size to the party, which is, I think we saw last night, can be an issue.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. So when I look at the Raptors, I look at their length. And I'm saying the Hawks and their aggression and length, really just size, last night destroyed the Heat, was murdered on the boards. It was ridiculous, the differential. And so you have guys like Siakam, and you have guys like Anunoby, and you have their kind of length there all over the court. Really, they put out a lineup that except for Fred VanVleet, they're longer than you. Remember, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but when Tyler Hero entered the NBA, among the reasons he slipped to the late lottery was because he had a negative wingspan. His arm span is less than his height. Typically, teams, and especially the Heat, don't go in that direction. So you're already playing with a deficit in your starting lineup when you have Tyler Hero out there. So I do think Toronto would be that problem. So for me, it's sort of 50-50 in this regard. You have Toronto and their length. But in a one-game showdown, Chicago has two and maybe three guys who single-handedly can beat you. And I'm talking about Zach LaVine, who can either go for 40 or 4. Nikola Vucevic, who whether he was in a Sixers uniform, whether he was in a Magic uniform, whether he's in a Bulls uniform, has tormented the Heat for a decade. He gets his double-doubles. Him and Hassan Whiteside used to have these great 20-20 games against each other. So you have that factor. The consistent guy is DeMar DeRozan. He will get his. He will get his efficiently. He will get his 2 at a time. He will get to the foul line, which was a huge problem for the Heat because within the opening minutes of that game last night, the Heat were already in foul trouble. Yeah. So you have that coming into play. So I think I lean toward the Raptors for this reason as the preferred opponent. Toronto is much better at home than they are on the road. I think that matters to Toronto. Chicago, you talked about how Toronto was better since the Pirtle trade acquisition. Chicago over the second half of the season, when you looked at Chicago's record, and then I looked at the final record, I don't know how that team got to 40 wins. They were dead. They were gone. They were buried. They were behind the Pacers. They were behind the Wizards. They were going nowhere. Billy Donovan got them to buy in. They came around. They played as a much better team. I think the Heat are screwed in Friday's game, except for one factor. They have to be a better version of themselves. Because you know what, Kurt Helin? I'm going to go through this with you now. We're going to look at the rosters, and my contention that the Atlanta Hawks had a better team on the floor from the get-go last night against the Heat than the Heat offered, especially with Jimmy being down. Roster for roster. Miami Heat, Toronto Raptors. You're building a team. You're Masai Ujiri. You're Pat Riley. You're an outside general manager.
Yeah.
Which roster do you think is better? Miami Heat or Toronto Raptors? And if you literally could, like one of these like celebrity wife swaps or whatever, you could, don't tell your wife that, you could switch teams like that. Which team would you rather have going forward? Which roster? Miami Heat, Toronto Raptors?
Well, going forward, I think Toronto's just younger, despite having Fred VanVleet and stuff. That would be part of it. But
right.
The Raptors also are just, and this is frankly a little true of the Bulls too, but the Raptors are just deeper, right? I've liked this roster on paper way more than it shook out this year, because of their length, because of their switchability, because they've got both of these teams come in, whether you're talking Caruso or OG, with elite perimeter defenders that they can throw at Jimmy Butler and be a problem starting right there. Like two teams that can make Jimmy. I mean, Jimmy can overpower Alex a little bit. Like you're going to make Jimmy Butler work for it. You've got size inside, but I've thought all season, and we've talked about this on the show. I just thought Toronto would be better than this. I thought they'd be a top 6, maybe top 4 team, a real problem in the East, and they just weren't. They just really weren't for most of the season. But I still like their potential.
It's crazy that they're a 9th place team with the talent that they have, and I know they fell off the cliff. The other factor there, before I move on to the Bulls, is this. Last night, of course, was weird enough. Trae Young is going to be traded before the game even started, and that kind of talk. And that does one of two things. That fires up the player, or that gets the player to quit. And man, Trae Young wanted that game last night.
Yeah.
And I think it was one, you don't own me. I'm not your kid, Miami Heat. And number 2, screw you, Hawks. If you trade me, I'm going to show you what you're giving up. And he mostly did that by filling out the box score and probably playing more of a team game than we're used to from Trae Young.
Yeah, definitely.
In Toronto, there was weirdness the last week of the season. When Nick Nurse would not commit to coming back, talked about maybe we need a change here. So let me ask you this, Kurt Helin. You can go one of two ways here. We're with Kurt Helin from Pro Basketball Talk and NBCSports.com and our RedRecover.com Inside the Paint Show. Kurt, does the Nick Nurse situation motivate the Raptors? Screw our coach. If he doesn't want to be here, we're still a team. Or is this a team that's saying, we might as well head to Cancun because our coach seemingly is headed there anyway?
Yeah, the Nick Nurse rumors were kind of just floating around in the background since mid-season, right? Like, yeah, I mean, it's not new. Because I mean, I don't think anybody questions his coaching acumen in general, but I think there was a lot of discussion of, did he just lose the room? Is it just too long with the same voice? Is it time for them to go somewhere new? And I think he's questioning that too. I don't think that, like you said, to your point, I don't think that changes. I don't know the Billy Donovan, I don't know if changing Billy Donovan fixes or changes anything in Chicago, but I think in the reassessment of whatever Toronto becomes, doesn't it feel like if Masai Ujiri really genuinely, the GM genuinely believes in this roster, which he seems to, then you swap out the one thing you can swap out.
Like Atlanta did.
Yes, exactly.
And you already have Nick Nurse heading to the Houston Rockets. He was coached their G League team. There's a connection there.
Well, that's right.
There might be the natural connection of you just take the best available former Raptors coach in Detroit to replace Dwayne Casey, and you do it that way. So you keep your Canadian fans covering from Windsor. So we'll have to wait to see what the Pistons do. Real quick, want to go before our break here to Chicago Bulls. So you look at the Chicago Bulls, and all season they've been getting ripped from their local media as they're not good enough and they have to rip apart the team. And yet they went against that and stayed with what they had. And they brought it back over the second half of the season. I don't know if they're committed to this roster or not. There's still a lot of gaps on that roster as it is. Yeah. When you look at the Chicago Bulls, I think they sort of are what they are. I think all season they look like a 10th place team. You know, they played like a 10th place team. They wound up as a 10th place team. But I believe they can win tonight in Toronto. Shockingly, they're favored. And they're favored by like 5 points, and I don't see necessarily why, except they're the hotter hand. So I get that. And I could see them beating the Heat because they've already beaten the Heat, gone 3-0. The Heat have not won a game against Chicago this season. When you look at the Chicago Bulls, and me telling you they need to win tonight to get past the Raptors, they need to win Friday to get into the playoffs for that short commute series against the Milwaukee Bucks that would at least alleviate any travel concerns for them. How concerned should the Miami Heat be if Chicago Bulls are the team on Friday? And which specific Chicago Bull should they be most concerned about?
I would look. The way the Heat played last night, they should be concerned if the Sisters of Mercy walk through the door. Like they don't have the right now to be unconcerned about anybody. Chicago, like you said, I think there's gaps in the roster. I think it's weird, but they also just have guys who can go get buckets. And I think the guy you start to worry about most is DeMar DeRozan. Because like you said, he's consistent. He's going to do it every night. He's going to get his. He is also going to finish top 3 in clutch voting. Like he is a guy that they turn to in the game is tight, who doesn't get rattled, who gets to his spots, who knocks down his twos and gives them something in the final minutes every time. He's not going to win the award. That'll go to De'Aaron Fox, but he will finish in the top 3. That's a concern in the club. Like just having one of those guys that you've got to go against, that's a concern. Jimmy Butler can try to body him up. You can throw different defenses at him, but DeMar DeRozan kind of gets his or is smart enough if you swarm him, he finds guys. He doesn't get rattled in those moments, and that's concerning in what probably will be a close game.
So after this break on redrecover.com Inside the Paint, Kurt Helin and I will give you our remaining predictions on tonight's 2 play-in games, what we think is going to happen Friday and going forward. And then we'll take a look at which Heat player or players have to step up the most. I'll try to get back to the chat board. You're filling up my computer. We'll try to get to that and much more after this break on redrecover.com Inside the Paint. And we're back on our third segment on redrecover.com Inside the Paint. In our first segment, we talked about the Heat's hideous, horrifying, hellacious loss to the Hawks. It's an early morning alliteration here. If you missed that, you can catch that on any of our Big O Show podcast outlets. Smash the like buttons as you scroll through. In our second segment, we talked about who the Heat might play in their Friday play-in game, depending on tonight's play-in round. If you missed that, go back to your podcast, smash like buttons. And now I want to sort of get to a little bit with Kurt Helin from Pro Basketball Talk and NBCSports.com, and I'm Ira Winderman from the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. Sort of predict the rest of the play-in round, see what might happen next for the Miami Heat, get back to the chat board. Stop yelling at me, people. We'll try to get to as much as we can, and the Big O will be back at the top of the hour to tell everyone why Kurt and I are wrong on the Big O Show. That's coming up at 10 a.m. Kurt, let's look at tonight's play-in games. Let's set the stage. First, last night, the Los Angeles Lakers defeated the Minnesota Timberwolves in a dramatic overtime game with a twist at the end that you have to see to believe. Anthony Davis got bailed out by the overtime. We'll get to that another time. First, the Lakers move on. They play the Memphis Grizzlies in the first round now. Man, they couldn't have gotten a better draw. Could they have, Kurt Helin?
No, they go up against a team that doesn't have size. Without Steven Adams, without Brandon Clark, a big Laker team with Anthony Davis, but the guys they added, Rui Hachimura and stuff, they added all this size and bulk, but they go up against the team. Yeah.
Gary Vanderbilt. So real quick, Kurt Helin, Lakers Grizzlies, if you were making a prediction, and I guess you will, how would you predict that series?
I'm still going to go Grizzlies in 7. I don't think the Lakers' the athleticism of the Grizzlies, their strength will ultimately overwhelm the Lakers, but we'll see. I think it's
Lakers
interesting.
in 6, but I think you could not get a better matchup. I think it's a very odd year. I think the top 3 teams in the West, as opposed to the top 3 in the East, are highly vulnerable, with Denver sitting at number 1, Memphis at number 2, and Sacramento at number 3 against the Warriors. Fine. So we have that. Atlanta Hawks, Boston Celtics. Atlanta Hawks advanced by humiliating the Miami Heat last night. They start against Boston Saturday afternoon. Atlanta Hawks, Boston Celtics. How do you see that, Kurt Helin?
Celtics in 5. I just think they're the much better
Gentlemen's
team.
sweep, same as the Heat last year. Yeah, I would agree with that. Boston is good. We don't know about Jaylen Brown's hand after his gardening accident last week and cut his hand on glass, so we'll have to see where he is. But I think their depth of talent by adding Brogdon, Smart coming back, White off the bench, I think they're in a good shape there. West, real quick, the Minnesota Timberwolves lost. So tonight they'll play the winner of the Oklahoma City Thunder at New Orleans Pelicans game. How do you see that, Kurt Helin?
I will take the Pelicans, but don't sleep on the Thunder. Let's put simply, Ira, best player on the floor in this game is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He is absolutely capable of winning.
Totally agree. They got a red-hot rookie in Jalen Williams. They're in a good position right there. Of course, the Heat had the best player on the floor, or were supposed to, in Jimmy Butler last night, and that didn't play out, so you just really never know. So I can understand all that. I don't understand the Pelicans, that without Zion Williamson, how they're that good, but they are. And they seem to find a way to get it done, and being at home, I can buy that. Minnesota Timberwolves against, I guess we're both saying New Orleans, but we think it could be Oklahoma City. Rudy Gobert comes back. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. How do you look at Minnesota's 9:30 p.m. Friday game in the Western Conference play-in finale?
I kind of like the Pelicans. I think the matchup, they've got the size to keep Karl Anthony Towns in check. They have an elite wing defender in Herb Jones. And I guess it really comes down to which Brandon Ingram shows up. Is he aggressive? Because if he's aggressive, he can get buckets with the best of them. And I just think it would overwhelm Minnesota. But we'll see. I think that's going to be an entertaining game if that's how it shakes out.
Yeah, I don't go with Minnesota for this reason. One, I think Gobert gets in the way, but he has a lot to sort of atone for. So maybe you'll see a better version of him, although it'll be interesting if he's clogging the lane again. I also think Anthony Edwards has to be better because he was horrible last night. And this is his chance, another national stage. So I think he will be on his game. I'm going to go through all those choices real quick. That's for the number 8 seed in the Western Conference. The number 1 seed is the Denver Nuggets, who no one believes in. But we're talking first round here.
Yeah.
If the Denver Nuggets play the Minnesota Timberwolves, how do you see that series going?
I still like Denver. I do think while I've got my questions about them, I think they're better than whoever comes in at 8. I still think Jokic and Gordon and Jamal Murray and everybody. I think they've got the depth to win.
Yeah, again, Minnesota's height and size, I think, would be the most competitive series of the 3 remaining possible teams there as their possible opponent. How do you think the Pelicans would do against the Nuggets?
I think they could give them some problems, but ultimately, I don't trust Brandon Ingram, who they need to run their offense without Zion there. I just don't trust him to put 4 out of 7 together.
Fair enough. And then how do you see Oklahoma City Thunder against the Nuggets?
Oh, I love watching Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. It won't be enough, but he will cause them problems. He's a top 10 player in the league, and I don't think everybody realizes it because nobody watches Thunder games.
Can you imagine Sam Presti not having his own lottery pick? I mean, could he have imagined that? It's like the guy's so used to dominating the lottery. That'll be crazy, Oklahoma City. Anyway, want to get the Western Conference out of the way so we could focus more on the East. Tonight, Toronto Raptors host the Chicago Bulls. Winner advances against the Heat 7 p.m. Friday. Loser is done for the season, is in the lottery. How do you see tonight Chicago Bulls, Toronto Raptors playing out?
I'll take the Raptors at home, but I think it's a coin flip of a game. You said the line was 5. That one kind of surprised me.
Chicago at 5. Chicago favorite because of the way that they're hot coming in.
Yeah, they've been playing great.
I think Chicago's a team that's been ready to teeter on something bad for a long time. And I think at the first sign of sort of adversity, they might crumble again. I probably will go with the Raptors. I'm not sold on either of these teams necessarily having the fortitude to push through this kind of game. I'm going to say Raptors, but by the slightest of margins, the wise guys tend to know. Miami Heat play Friday. If the Miami Heat, the team we saw last night, God help us, play the Chicago Bulls on Friday, who wins?
the team that played last night, then I'll take Chicago. I still think the Heat have a gear. I still think I think you'll get a better effort out of them. I'll take Miami in that against either of these teams. I think it's Miami. Ira, isn't it more about the Heat than who they're playing?
Yes. It's about the Heat and not being who they were last night and being more like they were in that nationally televised game late in the season against the Philadelphia 76ers, on their home court late in the season against the New York Knicks, on their home court late in the season against the Cleveland Cavaliers when they won. They have to decide who they are, where they are, and when they are. So I agree. Still think the Bulls can win that game. Miami Heat against Toronto Raptors Friday. If that happens, 7 p.m. Kaseya Center.
I'll still take the Heat, but that one will be a little more challenging. And that one, they've got to have a lot better band because, like I said, Jakob Poeltl's been sneaky quiet good for them, and they can't give up those kind of offensive rebounds. You can't give up those kind of second chances points to an athletic team like that. I'm
going to put it this way. If Fred VanVleet is going off and is back to the Freddie that he hasn't been most of the season, I would take Toronto over the Heat. And if DeMar DeRozan outplays Jimmy Butler, which is a tall order, I would take the Bulls. But we'll go forward with our thoughts of we'll see what happens both tonight in the play-in game, 9-10, and then Friday back in Miami, 7 p.m. Let's look ahead to Sunday, though. The league has already set a start time. Whoever comes out of the Heat's game on Friday night at 7 p.m. will play in Milwaukee at 5:30 p.m. Eastern against the number 1 seeded Milwaukee Bucks to start the best of 7 first round. I'll go backwards. We'll get to the most important at the end. If the Chicago Bulls play the Milwaukee Bucks, how do you see that playing out?
Oh, the Bucks. Look, I'll pick the Bucks against any of them. I think that in particular is not a matchup that scares Milwaukee. I don't think because they just don't have anybody who can even begin to guard Giannis.
Yeah, and again, Brook Lopez's side, I think it's offset so similar to Nikola Vucevic. He can hit the three, Vuk can hit the three. Lopez, the much better defender. He's a team defender. I like that matchup also. Toronto Raptors against the Milwaukee Bucks.
I think that's a little more interesting just because you're going to make Drew Holiday work. Fred VanVleet's going to make him work. They don't have, I guess it's Pascal Siakam. They've got OG. They've got some guys they can throw at Giannis, but I think it's an interesting matchup just because of the athleticism. They can run with them. They can run with them a little bit. The Bucks are still the better team, but that one's the matchup is just more interesting.
Yeah, that's well phrased. I would say Bulls, not much of a series. They'll have a bigger market. They'll have a U.S. market for television. Yeah. I think Raptors, because they have so much possibilities. I mean, there are times that Pascal Siakam is Giannis Antetokounmpo. When he's at the top of his game with his length and his reach and his scoring and can be a better shooter. So that makes it interesting. Okay, so the Miami Heat who played last night go away. We realize, like the Oscar-winning Everything, Anywhere, and Everywhere movie, that was the Heat from a different dimension. The real Miami Heat show up on Friday. They're ready to play. They beat either Chicago or Toronto. They get on a plane Saturday. They show up for what's a 4:30 local time start in Milwaukee on Sunday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern. Miami Heat against the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round, best of 7.
I think you can give them trouble. I mean, I'd still pick the Bucks in probably 6, but I think Miami is capable of, because you got to have it doesn't it come down to this? I mean, outside of Jimmy's obviously got to have an elite series. Bam's got to be elite in that series, right? He's the guy who's going to drive the Giannis assignment a lot.
Yeah, to me, there's another factor in play there, and it's the factor of Chris Middleton and where he stands with his season-long knee issue and now another one now. If Chris Middleton is healthy, the Milwaukee Bucks are much better than the Miami Heat. You're talking about Giannis Antetokounmpo, Drew Holiday, who really deserves to at least be thought all NBA level.
Oh, yeah,
Chris
absolutely.
Middleton scoring, Brook Lopez's anchor defense, Bobby Portis as a possible 6th Man of the Year award winner. Then you have the Miami Heat in depth from previous Heat contending teams with Goran Dragic and Jay Crowder. That's sort of a loaded roster, and 3-point shooting with Connaughton, to sort of balance out the floor game there also. I don't see that as more than a 5-game series. And I still think the Milwaukee Bucks think back to the bubble and what happened to them against the Heat when they went so meekly. Then this next season they come in, they beat the Heat by 97,000 points. Then in the 2021 playoffs, they blow Jimmy Butler and the Heat off the floor. I think Mike Budenholzer knows how to deal with the Heat, knows how to handle all of that. I think the Heat, if they played the Celtics, I think they're somewhat reside in the Celtics' head based on the fact of what they've previously done against them in the playoffs, the fact that they did stretch them to 7 games last season, that, the Celtics probably still remember Jimmy Butler's pull-up three that could have changed everything. I think the Heat would have had a more emotional and maybe more competitive series if they would have won last night, like they should have, and played the Boston Celtics. I don't think it's a good matchup for the Heat. Now, if Middleton's knee is not right and he misses time or isn't himself, that balances a little bit out because the Heat have trouble scoring against Milwaukee. Maybe Milwaukee's scoring comes down. Otherwise, I think you have an element and an issue of trouble there. So not the best for the Heat. You know what? It's like Big O has said all year on our Accurate Pembroke Pines reports when he's joined us here on RedRecover.com Inside the Paint. This Heat team just hasn't been right all year. Hasn't had that look. They've never sparked optimism. So going into the play, and everyone said, regular season, that's not the Jimmy Butler we're going to see. We're going to see a different player. We're going to see Bam come around. Didn't happen. I think the Heat are emotionally fragile now. I think the Heat will go into Friday on pins and needles. I think if Fred VanVleet hits 3 early threes, or Zach LaVine hits 3 early threes, or DeMar DeRozan gets Tyler Hero in early foul trouble, I really wonder about the Miami Heat's mental wherewithal. So, and I apologize to everyone on the chat. I'm sure Big O will get to a lot of these when he joins us at 10 a.m. But I want to sort of just wrap it up here with this, Kurt Helin. Since when we talk next week on Wednesday, based on my travel schedule, if I have a travel schedule, it might be a whole new world as we start our RedRecover.com Inside the Paint off-season shows, is this. If the Miami Heat, do not win on Friday night, major shakeup, minor shakeup, or a team constrained by the salary cap that has to run it right back?
It could be that last one, but I think they're more in line for, I would think major. I would think that there's going to be some hard decisions that need to be made after this season if they don't even get out of the play-in.
So let me throw some names at you and make it hard for you. If the Miami Heat lose on Friday, is Jimmy Butler definitively back with the Miami Heat next season?
Is Jimmy Butler definitively anything? I'll say likely. Yes, I'll say he's back.
If the Miami Heat lose on Friday, is Tyler Hero definitively back with the Miami Heat next season?
Ooh, I am less sold. He remains the best trade asset you've got in terms of if you're going to go get another playmaker or another elite player, he is the guy who still has to go into the deal. So, no, he is not definitively back.
If the Miami Heat lose on Friday, does Max Strus get a competitive market free agent offer from the Miami Heat?
Depends on what the market sets, I suppose. But I'm like trying to run through my head. But I'll say no. I think they're going to lowball him.
I think you're right because of what happened with Duncan Robinson. If the Miami Heat lose on Friday, does Gabe Vincent get a competitive NBA free agent market offer from the Miami Heat?
They might need to, only because they're locked into Lowry and they can't afford to. That might be the guy you have to keep just out of practical terms.
If the Miami Heat lose on Friday and don't advance to the playoffs and wind up in the lottery instead, do the Heat do everything and anything they can to try to trade Kyle Lowry, or do they try to salvage Kyle Lowry, or do they simply allow that money to play off the books and think further down the road?
I think they try to trade him. I'm just not sure that there's an option there. And ultimately, I don't know how you just have to run it back. I'm not sure if there's a market for him. I don't know if there's a market that doesn't involve you giving up a first for somebody to take him.
And last question of the week. If the Miami Heat do not advance on Friday and Bam Adebayo is not demonstrably better than he was on Tuesday against the Atlanta Hawks, the offseason narrative on Bam Adebayo becomes?
I listening to this chat board, are they going to be calling for his head? Are they going to be
calling for your head right now? So,
wow.
Yeah. So, which actually,
I don't get you a first. I'm just telling you now.
Yeah, Kurt, maybe a low second rounder, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's where we stand. If you missed any of our segments, they're all on all your big O podcast outlets. We'll be back next week, depending on my travel schedule, if there's a travel schedule. Again, 9 a.m. Wednesday on the RedRecover.com Inside the Paint Show. But I've got a feeling Orlando Alzugaray has a lot to say. And that's all coming up next as the Big O Show rolls on.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.